Good day to everyone. Today we will going to study the spelling and spelling reform. Now let's study the background starts from mid-1870s. The American Philosophical Association adopted 11 new spelling, and those are R, catalog, definite, guard, give, have, infinite, live, though, through, and wished. And this reform became successful with the help of the advocates. The first is Noah Webster, Benjamin Franklin, Andrew Carnegie, and President Theodore Roosevelt. Now let's discover the first English spelling reformer, Orms Ormolu. Long 20,000 lines form versified homilies stories in four Gospels relating to the life of Christ in the Acts of Apostles. Orm's attempts to represent the way the words were meant to be pronounced by creating a new, doubled consonants show that preceding vowel was short. Numerous Scandinavian words in the text reflecting his own dialect, and that was called Orm, Old Norse, serpent in Lincolnshire, Midlands were less of a Scandinavian settlement. The Ormulum is an early Middle English poetic text of some 20,000 short and rhymed lines produced in the northeast Midlands, possibly in the Abbey of Bourne in southern Lincolnshire. Late in the 12th century, its author, who was apparently also the scribe of the poem's surviving manuscript, identifies himself as Orm, or an Old Norse name meaning serpent, and says that he is an Augustinian canon. He addresses his manuscript to his brother and fellow Augustinian Walter, who seems to have been in an administration position in the abbey in which Orm lived and worked. At Walter's request, Orm says in his dedication he is producing an English translation of the entire year's Gospel text as listed in the Mass book, with each text accompanied by an interpretive homily in English verse. Now, let's study Noah Webster's Reformed spelling. In 1840s, the Phonetic Journal printed the Bible, and many classic works in Reformed spelling arose, and lots of public interest during that time. Next, in 1870, English Philological Society took up the question, and that was producers of OED started. What is OED stands for? OED stands for Oxford English Dictionary. Next is, in 1876, American Philological Association suggested 11 simplified spellings, and that are catalog, definite, guard, give, have, infinite, live, though, through, and wished. Now let's continue. In 1898, the National Educational Association formally adopted 12 simplified spellings, and that was though, although, through, throughout, thorough, thoroughly, thoroughfare, program, prologue, catalog, pedagogue, and decalogue. And in 1906, Simplified Spelling Board was founded in US. And Andrew Carnegie proposed more than 300 spellings, and he donated over 250,000 US dollars. Same year, 1906, US President Theodore Roosevelt promoted simpler spellings, ordered the government printing office to use the simplified spelling boards using 300 new spellings while Congress was in recess. The government printing office resisted. Congress revoked Roosevelt order. No money appropriated in this act shall be used for printing documents, unless same shall conform to the orthography in generally accepted dictionaries. Simplified spelling were used only in written items coming from the White House. Even then, only 12 words were used. For further understanding about reform spelling, let's proceed to this. Who is this? Let's find out. A lexicographer is an author or editor of a dictionary. Let's move on. This is the Webster's Dictionary 1828. Noah Webster, the lexicographer, laid out some of his ideas of an American system of spelling that would appear later in his American Dictionary of the English Language, 1828. It has been observed by all writers on the English language that the orthography or spelling of words is very irregular. The same letters often representing different sounds, and the same sounds often expressed by different letters. For this irregularity, two principal causes may be assigned. The first one is the changes to which the pronunciation of a language is liable from the progress of science and civilization. The second one is the mixture of different languages occasioned by revolution in England or by a predilection of the learned for words of foreign growth in the ancient origin. The first cause may be ascribed to the difference between spelling and pronunciation of Saxon words. The northern nations of Europe originally spoke much in gutturals. This is evident from the number of aspirates and guttural letters which still remain in the orthography, or words derived from those nationals, and from the modern pronunciation of the collateral branches of the Teutonic, the Dutch, the Scotch, and German. Why did spelling reform occur? Spelling reformers seek to make English spelling consistent and more phonetic so that spellings match the pronunciations better and followed the alphabetic principle. Common motives for spelling reform include making the language easier to learn, making it more useful for international communication, or saving time, money, and effort. However, there's a problem with spelling reform. What are those? Now, let's proceed to the problem with spelling reform. Number 1. The alphabet. An ideal spelling system, we all know, will have one symbol for one sound, one grapheme for one phoneme. But this principle throws up certain difficulties in practice. If we confine ourselves to consideration of the Latin alphabet, one major difficulty is that it is an arbitrary list of 26 letters, which do not necessarily correspond to the sound system of the languages which have to use it. In particular, they do not correspond to the sound system of English. The second one is the danger of parochialism. The sounds of any language can be viewed as a system of contrasting phonemes. The pronunciation of any word can be specified in terms of the string of phonemes that represent it, together perhaps with information about relevant prosodic features, in the case of English about stress or placement. In designing a scheme of spelling reform, we face a certain danger of insurality and parochialism, of assuming that everybody has the same set of phonemes and uses the same phonemes in particular words as we do ourselves. Unfortunately, this is not the case. What seems obvious and normal to one speaker may be exotic, unusual, subtle, and strange to another. The third one is the greater problems with vowels. Such variations in pronunciation mean we may have to violate the principle of one sound per letter and one letter per sound in quite obvious ways that probably everyone can accept. Greater difficulties perhaps arise with vowel sounds in sets of vowel contrast, where I think the danger is particularly strong of wrongly assuming that everybody makes the same contrast. Next, number 4, spell or omit R. From new spelling onwards, the importance of catering for accent other than received pronunciation has been clear from the treatment of historical R. Like most English people in my speech, I don't distinguish stork and stop. If spelling reform proposals do make a distinction, as they usually do, then the reason is letter A, historical, and letter B, because they are pronounced differently from one another in other accent. The number 5 is spelling the past tense. Oath missed with last T and missed with ed to be spelled identically because they are pronounced identically, right? Or should we give the past tense a consistent spelling shape with d even when, as in missed with ed, it is pronounced t? In deciding this issue, we should perhaps consider the Nigerians who do not usually pronounce missed like missed. This is because, under the influence of traditional orthography, they typically use a D sound in "mis" and in fact usually assimilate the S to sound Z, so say "mis" with voicing throughout. And now let's move on. This, with a few other inconsiderable alterations, would answer every purpose and render the orthography sufficiently correct and regular. The advantages to be derived from these alterations are numerous, great, and permanent. The first one is the simplicity of the orthography would facilitate the learning of the language. It is because now the work of years for children to learn to spell, and after all, the business is rarely accomplished. But with a proposed orthography, a child would learn to spell without trouble. In a very short time, in the orthography being very regular, he would never afterwards find it difficult to make a mistake. It would, in that case, be as difficult to spell wrong as it is now to spell right. Next is, a correct orthography would render the pronunciation of the language as uniform as the spelling in books. A general uniformity through the United States would be the event of such a reformation as I am here recommending all persons of every rank would speak with some degree of precision and uniformity. Such uniformity in these states is very desirable and would remove prejudice and conciliate mutual affection and respect. Next, such a reform would diminish the number of letters about the 16th or 18th. This would save a page in 18, and a saving of an 18 in the expense of the books is an advantage that should not be overlooked. And last, but a capital advantage of this reform in these states would be that it would make a difference between the English orthography and the American. This will startle those who have not attended to the subject, but I am confident that such an event is an object of vast political consequence. For the alteration, however small, would encourage the publication of books in our country, in the Philippines. It would render it in some measure necessary that all books should be printed in Philippines. The English would never copy our orthography for their own use, and consequently the same impression of books would never not answer for both countries. I hope you learned a lot from this lesson. Thank you for listening and God bless.